What's going on, everyone? It's Ben from YGO from Zero, back with another Critter format video. And today we're on a deck that sort of straddles the line between jank and not jank, and that's Fusion. Now, there are many different ways you can build a Fusion deck in Critter format, but I've elected to go with a version that doesn't lean too heavily into the Fusion side of things, and instead just uses it as sort of a surprising tech that can surprise your opponent and potentially win games that way. I personally think that going a bit more all in on Fusion, like potentially trying to play some of the other Fusion monsters like Black Skull Dragon and the like, is a path towards losing, because you have to play a lot of cards that can brick pretty hard, and in a format like Critter, you really can't afford to brick that much. So I really like this version of the Fusion strategy. But if y'all want me to play a janker version leaning way more heavily into the Fusion strategy, let me know and I'll try to throw something together. But until that point, here is my current version of the deck. Fusion was a strategy that was not very good in the previous format, Yu-Gi Kaiba, but got some major improvements in this format. The foremost among them being a new Fusion monster, Twin-Headed Thunder Dragon. Now, this is a Fusion monster that's made of two of the same monster, two Thunder Dragons. And it's actually quite easy to assemble these materials in hand due to the effect of Thunder Dragon. Thunder Dragon reads that you can discard it and add up to two Thunder Dragons from your deck to your hand. Now, even in decks that don't go for actual Fusion summoning with this, it does have benefits. It thins out your deck a bit. It can be used as a tribute monster to combo with things like potentially Change of Heart. It can be used as discard fodder if you play things like Magic Jam or Tribute to the Doomed. And most importantly, for the purposes of this deck, it can be used to buff up Muka Muka. Realistically, given that we're only playing one polymerization, this deck should probably just be viewed as a variant of like a Muka Muka Turbo sort of deck. But I do think that the ability to Fusion Summon does make this deck special, and it can actually come up in certain scenarios, even though most games it won't. I sort of view Fusion Summoning Twin-Headed Thunder Dragon as sort of a last resort play that you can use if your opponents manage to deal with everything else that you've been doing over the course of the game at the very end to bring out a big monster that can hopefully stand unopposed. Hopefully your opponent's used up a lot of removal up to this point, and hopefully it can surprise them. But you'll see what I mean by that in the games. Before diving into the games, let's break down the deck a little bit more. So I've already mentioned how this is basically a Muka Muka Turbo deck, using Thunder Dragon to beef up your hand and Muka Mukas to act as the main aggressive force in the deck. And in order to facilitate this more, we of course have the two recruiters of the format, two Sangan, two Witch. Sangan can search out Muka Muka along with a lot of other great monsters, and Witch can also search out Muka Muka, but more importantly it can search out Thunder Dragon. So if you do have a polymerization in hand and you have a Witch, you can use Witch to get to Thunder Dragon, get to a Fusion summon of Twin-Headed Thunder Dragon if you need to. We of course have other just very good utility monsters that can be searched out with Witch and Sangan. Two Mass Sorcerer because it's an all-star in the format. One Cannon Soldier for similar reasons, although interestingly enough, Cannon Soldier actually adds another dimension to the Fusion summoning, because if your opponent thinks that you can't get enough monsters on field to actually burn them to death with Cannon Soldier, you can actually get one more additional special summon off of the Fusion summon of Twin-Headed Thunder Dragon, which does come up more often than you might think. We also have a White Magical Hat against things like Exodia. We have 3 Giant Soldier of Stone to act as a bit of defense to buy us time to draw into the pieces that we want to see. And lastly, for the monsters, we have 3 Lodgin, the Mystical Genie of the Lamp, to serve as another sort of offensive pressure. For the spells, we have, of course, the Power 5 limited spells, Change of Heart, Dark Hole, Monster Reborn, Pot of Greed, and Raigeki, all just insanely strong. Also, it's not likely to come up, but you can actually Change of Heart an opponent's Thunder Dragon if they are playing it, which a lot of decks are doing in this format. And if they've summoned it out for some reason, you can Change of Heart it and polymerization it off with another Thunder Dragon in your hand, which is kind of a funny combo. You might not necessarily want to do that, but it's out there as a possibility. We have 3 Fisher to deal with our opponent's monsters. We have 2 Last Will, which can be great in any Muka Muka Turbo sort of deck. If your opponent trap pulls one of your Muka Mukas, you can Last Will out another, and it'll still likely be very beefy. We have 1 Polymerization because we're only playing the Twin-Headed Thunder Dragons as our fusion monsters, and we won't have enough fusion materials in deck to make more than one. We only really need this one copy. And lastly, we have 2 Swords of Revealing Light to buy us time while we draw into the pieces that we need. For the trap cards, we have 1 Mirror Force, crazy card in this format. 3 Solemn Judgment, another crazy card in this format. Not every deck plays this, and I don't think that every deck should play this. But I think in a deck like this, it works out well. If your opponent tries to negate your fusion summon, then you might consider using this. As well as if your opponent tries to use a lot of removal to clear your Twin-Ended Thunder Dragon when it's out on the field. So I like this card in the deck. We also have 3 Waboku to protect our life points and our monsters, and notably you'll notice that we are not playing Trap Hole. The reason for this is, given that we're playing a sort of Muka Muka Turbo strategy, and we are playing a 2800 monster that we can special summon out relatively easily, we have ways of dealing with our opponent's monsters if they bring them out, and the only thing that we really urgently care about hitting with Trap Hole would be something like a White Magical Hat. Trap Hole unfortunately can't hit something like Mass Sorcerer. So that's what we're really scared of, and I don't think it's worth playing just for that. But we do have 3 Trap Holes in the side deck if our opponent's playing a strategy with a lot more beaters, like Jiraiguma or something that can be harder to get over. I think we can bring in the Trap Holes for that. But as is, I think in the main deck, they aren't really as worth it. For our side deck, we have 3 Jiraigumos if we need to get even more aggressive. These can be very good to bring in. We have 3 Magician of Faith, mainly because Magician of Faith is a very good card, and if we think that we don't need some of our more defensive options, like maybe some Giant Soldiers of Stone, we can bring this in to cycle back some of our spells. We also have a Man-Eater Bug to act as more removal if we want it, and we have 2 card destructions to deal with Exodia strategies. Lastly, we have 3 Summon Tools of the Bandit. If our opponent is on a heavy counter trap strategy, these can be good to bring in to negate some of their counter traps. And of course, I mentioned it earlier, but the Fusion deck has 3 Twin-Headed Thunder Dragons. You're likely never going to actually be in a situation where you're going to make more than one of these, but, you know, you might as well play 3. There's no reason not to, so we're playing 3. Honestly, we could even potentially play more fusion monsters just to sort of psych our opponents out even more. Make them think that we're maybe on like Summon Skulls and Red Eyes Black Dragons in the main deck as well, because we want to make Black Skull Dragon or something. You can definitely do that. There's no downside to doing that. I just wanted to present the deck at its most basic, so that's why I have the list before you here. But how will this deck do in some games? Will we actually be able to fusion summon Twin-Ended Thunder Dragon, and will it actually make a difference? Let's find out. Okay, we've got some games against Ronnie Tsunami here. I think this is the first time we've featured them on the channel. So we're playing Fusion, unclear what they're playing. Let's see how the games go. We lose the rock, paper, scissors first, so that's unfortunate. Looks like we will be going second here. But honestly, not the worst, because we can sort of respond to what they do on their first turn. Thunder Dragon's great to have in the opening hand. Let's hope we don't draw the other one. They're just going to set one and pass, and we're going to activate Thunder Dragon, just get those 2 remaining copies to hand as quick as possible. This is actually an important thing to note when ordering this play. If you have a Thunder Dragon in hand and you're going to activate something like Pot of Greed, you want to activate the Thunder Dragon first, because if you activate Pot of Greed first, there's always a chance you could draw into one of the additional Thunder Dragons in your deck. So getting the Thunder Dragons out of your deck first and foremost is the way to go here before activating Pot of Greed. Even though in general, when you get Pot of Greed, your natural instinct is to activate it right away. So we activate the Thunder Dragons, get some Thunder Dragons to hand. We Pot of Greed here, and we do draw Muka Muka, which is one of the best cards we could have drawn here. This Muka Muka is really, really big. It has 2700 attack, which can get over any defender in the format. So we're just going to attack into their set. It is a Giant Soldier Stone, so I'm very glad we did that. And then because we'd have to discard for hand size here, we're going to set a Mirror Force and pass back to them. Mirror Force is also good if they do manage to have some way to get over the Muka Muka, even though it's very unlikely. They're going to Pot of Greed themselves, and so they'll be able to draw 2 cards. They're going to bring out a Muka Muka of their own, and it looks like our Muka Mukas are tied. So, there's the Fisher. So that's kind of unfortunate that Muka Muka has 2100 attack. We might want to Mirror Force this, honestly. We can get him with Mass Sorcerer next turn to draw a card, which could be pretty good. And we do, in fact, Mirror Force that. I think that's the right move. We had nothing to get over that. Otherwise, they're going to activate Last Will, so they will be able to get out another monster, unfortunately. They're going to get out a Witch, so this will allow them to search whatever they need afterwards. Kind of unfortunate, but not the worst. Darkhole's a pretty good draw. We check what they have used here, and I think the best play here is to just bring out a Lodgin. We could attack over their Witch with the Cannon Soldier. We could also just set a Mass Sorcerer in case they want to attack into it. But we don't really have a way to protect the Mass Sorcerer. I think just summoning out the Lodgin and attacking in, yes, they do get a search, but it's not the worst. If they search out another Muka Muka, it will only tie Lodgin in terms of attack. After summoning it out. So that wouldn't be that bad. I think the punish is if they have Trap Hole, but if they Trap Hole or Lodgin, then the worst that they can do really is just attacking in with the Witch next turn. So I think we're going to think about it for a bit, and we are just going to go aggressive here. It is a Trap Hole, unfortunately, so we will lose the Lodgin. And we're not going to set anything. We could set the Dark Hole as a bluff, but with Heavy in the format, we don't really want to do that. They're just going to switch Witch to attack, summon out a Lodgin, and just get in for 2,900. That's a lot of damage, but it's not the worst thing in the world. We do have Dark Hole to clear the board if we want to use it. They're just going to set one pass back to us. White Magical Hat is really good. This would incentivize us to Dark Hole. We could Dark Hole, summon out White Magical Hat, try and snipe whatever they add to hand. We could also Dark Hole, summon out Mass Sorcerer, and a way to dodge around Trap Hole. Kind of iffy. We are Dark Holing here either way. We don't have a way to deal with that otherwise. And they're going to add a Sangan, which means that we don't really have to worry about like a Mass Sorcerer or a White Magical Hat attacking into our own cards unless they already have it. So it's kind of iffy about what we want to do here. We do summon out the White Magical Hat because if we can manage to discard that Sangan, then they won't have a Recruiter to search more stuff, which could be pretty nice. And they're going to actually Solemn that. Wow, that's a big play on their part. I'm honestly not too torn up about that because this cost them 4,000 life points, which puts them down pretty low. Unfortunately, it means that they probably got something pretty good in their hand. They're just going to bring out a Sangan, though, and attack in for 1,000. Perfectly fine by us. They're going to set one more, pass back to us. Muka Muka is pretty good. We could just summon out that Muka Muka and attack in if we want to. Given that we're at low life points, though, we might want to set a Masked Sorcerer instead. We are going to do that instead, and I think that's fine. They're just going to switch the Sangan to defense, set another pass back to us, and we're feeling very good about that. Reborn is a great draw as well. We're going to summon out Muka Muka. It has 2,100 attack, which is pretty nice. It can get over a Giant Soldier of Stone if that's what they have set. And we're going to attack into their set. It is Giant Soldier, which is pretty nice for us. They're going to draw they're passing back to us. That's really nice, actually. We draw a Fissure, which isn't the worst, but we can actually just switch our Mass Sorcerer to attack and try and get in for a lot of damage here. We could Reborn, like the Muka Muka, and go for lethal, but I don't really think that's worth it. It's a bit risky if they have Mirror Force or Waboku. So I think the best play, honestly, is just flip up Mass Sorcerer and attack in. I think, actually, we don't even need to go for the draw here. We should just go for the damage. Muka Muka's at 2,400. If we drop them down to 1,600, we can kill them with Cannon Soldier, just summoning it out, reborning something back. So that is pretty good. But we do attack with the Muka Muka first. I do think this is a mistake. But let's see if it comes back to bite us. They are going to search a Cannon Soldier with the Sangan, which is kind of worrying, but we're not at risk of dying from Cannon Soldier yet. So hopefully it doesn't end up mattering. They're going to take 900 from the Mass Sorcerer. We draw a Witch, which is great. We'll set the Witch in case they have a board clear, and then pass back to them. But I think we could have won this turn if we attacked with Muka Muka instead, depending on what their back row is. So they would have Waboku'd probably if we attacked with the Muka Muka. So, you know, we might not have won this turn as I thought here, but I think it would have been the correct play to attack with the Muka Muka anyways. We're going to set a Fissure, pass back to them. Fissure is just a bluff, and they will activate Swords, so that will flip up our Witch. And they're just going to set one, pass back to us. We draw a Giant Soldier of Stone. We could just bring out Cannon Soldier, start tributing, try and just deal damage to them if we want. I don't think we need to go for that yet, though, but it looks like we are. We're prioing. We are going to probably tribute the Witch. Yep, we do tribute the Witch. Deal 500. We search out a Sangan to hand. If we can tribute off a Recruiter every turn, that'll be pretty nice. We're going to switch the Mass Sorcerer to defense, pass back to them. I think this is really weak to a board clear like Raigeki or Darkhole. So I think this is maybe too much of a risk, but we do have the Reborn to bring back the Cannon Soldier. So if they do clear our whole board, we can bring it back to get the damage still going. So it's not the worst thing in the world, but it's kind of risky. We're just going to set the Sangan so that way they can't Solemn Judgment it or Trap Hole it. We are going to tribute it for Cannon Soldier, search out another Sangan. And we have to set the Solemn because we've got 7 cards in hand, so we have to discard at the end of the turn. But I think that setting Solemn here is good. This way we can stop a board clear if they do try to do it. They're going to activate Change of Heart, and we could Solemn Judgment this if we wanted to, because having a Muka Muka of their own is pretty bad. Unfortunately for them, the Muka Muka will only be at 1500, so that can clear one of our Cannon Soldier or Mass Sorcerers, but it won't be able to deal a ton of damage. So it's kind of iffy here whether we let them do this or not. We know that they have a Cannon Soldier of their own, so they could tribute off our Muka Muka after doing this. It's a bit risky, but I think we do just let it go because we're saving the Solemn Judgment for when they try and make a big play. They're going to attack over a Cannon Soldier. Very unfortunate that we do lose that. And they flip up a Cannon Soldier of their own, tribute off our Muka Muka, and we'll take 500 from that. They're just going to pass back to us, and we could honestly just Fisher that Cannon Soldier away, and it looks like we will. So we Fisher that away, set the Sangan, and then we're just going to pass back to them. We don't really need to set the Fisher now, and having 6 cards in hand for if we draw a Muka Muka or if we reborn a Muka Muka is very nice. So they're just going to set one of their own, pass back to us. Fisher is decent. Can we win? We can't win this turn. We can get close to winning if we reborned the Cannon Soldier, but unfortunately we'd only have about 4 tributes, which would drop them down to 100, which isn't quite enough. We're going to think about this because we could just set another monster and then pass back to them, buying another turn. Next turn, we could Cannon Soldier them for game, potentially. But it looks like we are just going to bring back Muka Muka to have a big beater and try and get in for damage this way. We're going to just switch the Mass Sorcerer to attack and attack in. I think, honestly, we could have flipped up the Sangan as well, because then if they Mirror Forced, we could get a search off the Sangan. I'm not sure why we didn't. I think we really should have, but we didn't. And they have Woboku anyways, so it doesn't really matter. But main 2, we're just going to Fisher away that Mass Sorcerer in case they have some way to get it to attack us directly. Like if they have a Raigeki, we can clear our board. That'd be pretty bad. So they're going to Heavy Storm, and we're going to lose with Solemn Judgment, unfortunately. And they're going to Reborn here, reborning a Witch. Looks like they'll be able to clear the Mass Sorcerer here, get in for 200. And then they'll activate Swords. So, unfortunately, we will have to bide our time a bit longer here. But I think we're still in a very good position. If they have a board clear, of course, that's bad for us. But it's not the worst. We don't need to Fisher that Witch yet. They're going to attack into Sangan here. We will search out a Muka Muka in case they have like a Fisher or something for our other Muka Muka, which is very likely. They're going to set one, pass back to us. Solemn Judgment's pretty nice. We can set that. We'll set the Solemn Judgment, set a Giant Soldier of Stone in case they want to, like, Change of Heart it or something. If that's a Magician of Faith, yeah, who knows what they'd want to do. Or if they like Raigeki or Darkhole or something like that. It's better just to set the vanilla monster to serve more defensively when Swords is up. We don't need to bring out our other beater on board yet. They're going to Fisher away our Muka Muka, and they're going to check our graveyard, see what we've used, and just switch the Witch to defense, pass back to us. We draw Woboku, which is pretty nice as well. We could set that if we wanted to. It kind of deprives from our Muka Muka's attack value, though, so we might not want to do it. We are going to do it anyways. I don't think that's bad. It's not the best, but it's not bad either. They're going to summon out a Lodgin, and they're just going to attack into our set here. And it is a Giant Soldier, so they will take 2. And they'll pass back to us. Raigeki is an insanely good draw. I think we could just win here because we've got the Solemn for whatever they have set. And we can just Raigeki their board away. So unless they get Karibo to hand with the Witch, I think we're fine. We'll bring out the Muka Muka and just Raigeki their board away. And we're just going to switch the Giant Soldier Stone to attack and just attack in, and hopefully that'll be the end of the game. They do have Waboku, but we can just solemn this, so it is fine. And that is the end of the game indeed. So, unfortunately, we did not draw Polymerization there. We had 2 Thunder Dragons in our hand pretty much the entire time. And if we had drawn Polymerization, then we would have been able to get another monster on field for Cannon Soldier, potentially kill them out of nowhere. Which is what I meant when I said that, you know, the special summon from Polymerization can come up in the case where you're trying to burn your opponent to death with Cannon Soldier. But even though we weren't able to do that, the deck was robust enough on its own, and Muka Muka was enough of a threat that we were able to take game 1. Let's see how well we do in game 2. So, of course, we're going second again because we managed to win the first game of the match here. Drawing Muka Muka this early is very nice because it will be pretty buff if we just summon it out. So, we might want to do that. We're just going to set the Giant Soldier, though. I think this is smart. We're playing around if they have, like, Trap Hole or something. We don't want to get our Muka Muka Trap Hold and then have no follow-up. So, playing a bit defensively, I think makes sense. They're just going to send another pass back to us. Raigeki is very good, but we don't really need to use it yet. And the reason we don't need to use it yet is because they have no spells or traps in the graveyard. So, it's unlikely that their set monsters are like flip monsters like Magician of Faith or Mask of Darkness. It's much more likely that their set monsters are defenders or recruiters. So, we're going to save the Raigeki for when we can get more value out of it. They're going to flip the Witch up, so it looks like they do have a Recruiter, and they've also got a Mass Sorcerer up. So this would be bad if they can actually get through our set, but it looks like they're just going to attack in with the Witch, which honestly we don't care about, because Giant Soldier Stone can defend against that. They're going to set one pass back to us. Fissure is okay. We don't really need it yet, though. We're going to bring out Sangan and just attack over the Mass Sorcerer. This is because we want to deprive them of the Mass Sorcerer draw, and we are very worried that they have like a Trap Hole or something. And if they have a Fissure next turn to clear the Giant Soldier, we don't want to leave the Mass Sorcerer on field. So we'll bring out Sangan. If they had Trap Hold this, we would have gotten a search, so it wouldn't have been the worst anyways. And we're just going to pass back to them. They can just get over the Sangan here, and they will. But honestly, this isn't that bad because we get an extra card to hand to buff up our Muka Muka even further. We'll search another Muka Muka just to have the insurance here. Polymerization is good. If we do manage to get a Thunder Dragon to hand, we will be able to bring out Twin-Headed Thunder Dragon, which can be pretty devastating for our opponent. We're just going to bring out the Muka Muka, and they will unfortunately Trap Hole that. Luckily, we have another Muka Muka in hand for later, but it won't really help us now. Looks like they're just going to switch the Witch to defense, pass back to us. And we're feeling very good about this. We're just going to bring out Muka Muka, and we can just attack their set monster. We will, and it's just another Witch, so they will be able to search out a Muka Muka of their own. Kind of unfortunate. They do have a lot of cards in hand, but we also have a lot of cards in hand. So, at worst, the Muka Muka can crash, and we do have a Waboku for that if they try to make that play. They are going to Dark Hole here, which is very unfortunate for us. We will lose our Muka Muka, and they will get a search. And they're going to search out Mass Sorcerer. They made a mistake getting Sangan there. And they're going to bring out Mass Sorcerer and just attack in. We could Waboku this, but they already have 6 cards in hand. I don't think an additional card will matter that much. So we will just take it. Save the Waboku for a time when it could be more impactful here. And they're just going to set one pass back to us. White Magical Hat is a great draw. If we summon this out and attack into Mass Sorcerer, we can threaten to discard a card from their hand. They're likely going to like Trap Hole the Mass Sorcerer or the White Magical Hat. Oh, they have Solemn again. Okay, that's fine by us. They're down to 3,500 now. And we can Fissure away the Mass Sorcerer, so we are protected for next turn. We'll pass back to them. If they have another Mass Sorcerer, that's kind of rough, but not the worst. They'll activate Heavy here, and we'll just chain Waboku. We're perfectly fine with that. That's about the best trade we can make for one of their heavies. They're going to set 2 pass back to us, and we've got some options here. We could get aggressive. We could Change of Heart their set, bring out Cannon Soldier, and try and get in that way. Might be worth doing. It does look like that is what we're doing. We're going to bring out Cannon Soldier first. This might be a mistake. We might have wanted to Change of Heart their set first, and then summon Cannon Soldier with priority, tributed it off. But I think that this is fine. If they did have Trap Hole, we could still Change of Heart if we wanted to, or we could Swords, or we have a bunch of different options here. So I don't think it's the worst. We will change of heart, and we're just checking what that is. It's a man-eater bug. Of course, we're not going to flip it up because we'd have to pop itself. We'd much prefer to tribute it off with the Cannon Soldier, and we will do that. To drop them down by 500, we'll attack in with the Cannon Soldier, drop them down 1,400 more, and we're feeling very good about this. I honestly think that maybe we should activate Swords Revealing Light, because I think over the course of the next couple turns, we can just win through Cannon Soldier burn alone. So I think that might be the way to go, and that is what we're going to do. We're just going to activate Swords. If they draw a Lodge in this way, they can't out the Cannon Soldier. So let's hope they don't have a way to deal with this. They're going to Pot of Greed here. That could potentially draw them a way to deal with it. It looks like they're just going to set 2 and pass, which honestly we're very fine with. Sangan is a great draw here. We can summon out Sangan, tribute off for Cannon Soldier, and just Raigeki their monster away, and that could potentially be enough to do it. We're going to, that is what we're going to do. We're going to set the Sangan, tribute it off with the Cannon Soldier, drop them down to 1,100, search out a Witch. The Witch can get us into Thunder Dragons, which can get us into Twin-Headed Thunder Dragon with our Polymerization in hand. And we are just going to Raigeki their set. They are going to Solemn that, so that's kind of unfortunate. And honestly, we might want to just tribute the Cannon Soldier now to drop them down to 50, which is very vulnerable. But honestly, there isn't really much of a difference between 550 and 50, so we're just going to pass back to them. If they do have a way to deal with the Cannon Soldier, they do, but it looks like they do not. Set with a Giant Soldier and a Trap Hole, and it looks like their other card don't really do anything here. I guess they... No, yeah, there's not really anything they could do. Yeah, quite unfortunate for them, but very fortunate for us. However, you'll notice that we didn't actually manage to summon out Twin-Headed Thunder Dragon this game. It's kind of disappointing, and it does happen when you only have one Polymerization in deck. We did actually play a rematch after this match, so maybe we'll be able to bring out Twin-Headed Thunder Dragon there. So let's find out. Okay, we have our second match against Ronnie Tsunami. We're playing the same decks because we just went into a rematch right away. But honestly, these decks are pretty standard, and we haven't actually shown off to Ronnie Tsunami that we are on Fusion. All they know is that we play Thunder Dragons and Muka Mukas, so they don't really have a good way to guess that we're on Fusion yet, although maybe the 3-card extra deck could clue them into that, but honestly, people play cards in their extra deck as bluffs or mind games, so not really a good indicator. So we can still potentially surprise them in these games with a Fusion Summon if we manage to pull it off. Having Polymerization in the opening hand makes it more likely that we'll be able to do that, so we're very happy to see that. They're just going to set 1, pass back to us. We could just summon out Muka Muka here and just try and attack in. We could also summon the Lodge in and try and attack in case it's a Trap Hole. But I think on average, given this hand, the Muka Muka will probably have less attack as the game goes on. So we might want to start with that, and we do. They do have Trap Hole, unfortunately, so we will lose the Muka Muka. We'll just set a Waboku, pass back to them. You know, we're not likely to use this if they have like a Mass Torture or something, but it's good to have the option. And if they bring out a White Magical Hat, that could be pretty bad for us. And they do bring out a White Magical Hat, so we will actually Waboku this because we don't want to lose any of the cards in our hand. They're going to set 1, pass back to us. Sangan's pretty great. We could just crash into the White Magical Hat, but that doesn't really protect us from if they have another. So we're going to try to summon out Lodge and get over it that way. Attack in, and they do have Waboku, so they will be able to protect it. But we can activate Fissure here to clear it. So we're going to do that, set a Solemn Judgment, pass back to them. We don't really want to use the Solemn Judgment yet, but it's good to have it just in case. Our hand isn't that good at the moment. They're going to Fissure away our Lodge in and summon out a Witch. We will take that 1100, that's perfectly fine. And they're going to set 1, pass back to us. We don't really have many good options here. We can set the Sangan, pass back to them. Sangan can get us into Witch, can get us into Thunder Dragon, so that will potentially enable us to Fusion Summon in the near future. But it's unclear how good that would be at this point. They're going to Swords, flip up our Sangan, see what it is, and just attack into it. So we will get a search off of the Sangan. We'll search out a Witch. And they're just going to pass back to us. This is pretty great for us. We can just set the Witch and pass back to them. We could have set the Mirror Force as well if they made a very aggressive play. But they can't clear our set monster with their Witch. And if they do summon out a Beater and then try and reborn their White Magical Hat, for instance, then we could Solemn that if we wanted to. So I think it's worth just setting it. And it looks like they're just going to switch the Witch to defense, pass back to us. And we hard draw Thunder Dragon. That's really good, actually. We can get 2 Thunder Dragons to hand, and now we do have access to the fusion if we want it. At this point, it would be kind of bad to make the fusion, though, because we can't attack with it. It leaves it open to removal spells like Fissure or something. So we're not going to do it yet. We are going to hold on to this and save it for an opportune moment. And this is something that you have to do a lot with this deck in Critter. No matter how cool it may be to just fusion summon out a big monster, you've got to take stock of the situation at hand. If you have a Muka Muka on the field that is getting a lot of attack from your big hand, you don't necessarily want to lose 3 cards from that hand by fusion summoning out a Twin-Ended Thunder Dragon. So you definitely want to bide your time when you have the combo, but it is a very nice thing to just have access to go into at a moment's notice and surprise the opponent potentially. They're going to bring out a Muka Muka of their own, and that isn't a very big Muka Muka, it's only 1500, but they likely have the read that we have a Witch set, so they can get in here, and they will do that. We're going to use Witch to search out a Witch, might as well. And they're going to attack in with their Witch, that's perfectly fine. They'll pass back to us. Raigeki is good, but not really on this board. We're going to set the Witch, set the Mirror Force, pass back to them. If they bring in another monster, it might be worth Mirror Forcing this. And honestly, if they have their board the same, it might also be worth Mirror Forcing. Depends on what else they have. They're going to attack into the Witch, and we're going to let that through. We can search out like a Lodgin or a Muka Muka of our own that can clear any monster on their field. We will search out the Muka Muka, and they're going to attack in with the Witch. We'll take another 11. They're going to set 1, pass back to us. Reborn is a great draw here. That'll be good for later. We are going to bring out Muka Muka. They are going to Solemn Judgment that, which means that they really don't want us to stick beaters on the field. And I think this actually is the end of the game. We can Reborn back a Lodgin, Fusion Summon out a Twin-Ended Thunder Dragon, and Raigeki their board away. And we do have a Solemn set to use against whatever their last remaining back row is. So we can actually just win here. And we can win using the combo, which is very exciting. So we're going to Reborn first. They're going to try Solemning, but we're going to Solemn that as well. I think actually we don't need to Solemn this. We could just Reborn, or we could just Raigeki and Fusion Summon. Yeah, I think this is a mistake to Solemn in case they had a Karibo. But we're just going to do it anyways. It doesn't really matter at this point. We're going to Raigeki their board away and Polymerization out a Twin-Headed Thunder Dragon. And that will be the end of the game. So as you see there, like, generally you want to use the Fusion Summons in this deck to serve as a last bit of push out of nowhere. It's something that your opponent probably isn't anticipating, and as such you can use it to just get a bunch of damage on the board and potentially kill them, especially when Solemns are as prevalent in the format as they are. So it's not necessarily like a boss monster, it's more of a finisher monster. I think in other versions of the Fusion deck, you can definitely make them more into boss monsters, but I like this style of play a bit better. And I think it fits Critter format a bit more. But it's nice to see a Fusion Summon happen, no matter how we're using it. So let's see if we can do it again in Game 2. We are going to be going second here, because we did manage to win the first game. And we hard draw Thunder Dragon first thing. This is actually a killer hand here. We're going to draw, we don't draw the other Thunder Dragon, which is very nice to see. We're going to bring out Muka Muka, discard Thunder Dragon, get 2 Thunder Dragons to hand. And we're just going to attack in here. Try and hit over whatever they have set. It is a Giant Soldier. We're going to set a Fissure because the Muka Muka is still at a very sizable 2100. And we don't want them to think that we have no outs to whatever they're doing. And we're just going to pass back to them. They're going to set 1, pass back to us, and we're feeling very good about this. We're going to bring out a Witch and just attack in. This is to play around Mirror Force because, if we were sure they didn't have Mirror Force, we could bring out Mass Torture, potentially attack in that way. But I think this is the safer play. And it will all connect there, so we're just going to pass back to them. We're feeling very good. They Dark Hole the board away, but honestly that isn't the worst for us because we can just search out another Muka Muka from our deck. They're going to bring out a Cannon Soldier and attack in, but that is perfectly fine. They're going to activate Swords, which is a bit unfortunate for us, but not the end of the world. We're going to Fissure away their Cannon Soldier just to prevent any shenanigans. And then we're just going to set a Sangan, set a Last Will as a bluff, and pass back to them. It's unlikely that they're going to heavy this board, given that they've got Swords up. And if they do heavy the board, honestly, we're okay with that. They're just going to pass back to us, and we draw a Witch, which is great. We can set that. If they've got a board clear for this, then that's perfectly fine. We get 2 searches. And they're just going to pass back to us again. Swords is okay. We don't really need to use it yet. We might want to, though, because I think we do have this game wrapped up in the next couple turns, depending on what they've got. They're going to bring out a Muka Muka of their own, and Raigeki our board away, and we're perfectly fine with that. We get 2 searches here. We are taking a little bit of damage, but it's honestly not that bad. And having the Cannon Soldier when their life points are already pretty low is pretty reassuring to see. They're going to attack in with an 1800 attack Muka Muka, which is perfectly fine by us. They're going to set 1, pass back to us. And you might be wondering why we didn't search an additional Muka Muka to hand. And the reason we didn't is just in case this happens. So we summon out the Muka Muka that we searched already. They do have a trap hole for that. But we've got Last Will, so we can bring out another Muka Muka from our deck. And that will still be able to get over their Muka Muka. This is a really, really big Muka Muka. With 8 cards in hand, this Muka Muka is up to 3,000 attack points. That's the size of a Blue Eyes. Crazy. We're going to attack in to their Muka Muka. They do have Waboku, unfortunately. We're going to set Swords Revealing Light. I think we could have actually activated it here, but I don't really think there's a risk to setting it. Unfortunately, we don't have another way to get rid of another card in our hand, so we will have to discard for hand size at the end of our turn. And all our cards are really good. We want to keep the 2 Thunder Dragons in hand for later, for if we draw Polymerization. But honestly, given how close this game is to ending, and how many other great cards we have in hand, we might not need it. So it might honestly be worth to discard one of those. We think about this for a while, and we eventually do that. I could definitely see maybe discarding a Mass Sorcerer because we have 2, or a Lodgin because we already have a big beater in the form of Muka Muka. We just have so many good cards in hand here, so there's really a lot of different things we could do there. They're going to activate Fissure, so we will lose our Muka Muka, unfortunately. And they're going to attack in for 1,500, which is not that bad. We've got a Lodgin that can get over that pretty easily. We're going to bring out the Lodgin, attack in. Their Muka Muka is only at 1,200, so we honestly could have brought out the Cannon Soldier if we so wished, but better to save that for later. We're just going to pass back to them, and they're going to bring out a Lodgin of their own, set 1, and pass back to us. We are perfectly fine with that. We've got a Fissure. We're going to bring out White Magical Hat, and we are going to attempt to Fissure their monster. They do have Solemn Judgment, so they will drop down to 2,100. And we're just going to crash and just try attacking in with the White Magical Hat. They do have Waboku, so we'll lose our Lodgin. Main phase 2, we're just going to activate Swords and pass back to them. If we can potentially last long enough to get a Cannon Soldier up and tributing monsters, then this could be pretty good. They're just going to set 2 and pass back to us. We're feeling very nice about that. Mirror Force is a decent draw. We're going to set a Sangan because we don't need to commit the Cannon Soldier to board just yet. They're going to set 1 of their own, pass back to us. Raigeki is great. We can just activate Raigeki, try and get in for a ton of damage here. And we're going to flip up Sangan, and that is what we're going to attempt to do. We'll attack in for 2,000 here. If this does connect, then we can summon Cannon Soldier in with priority tribute a monster. And it doesn't connect. They've got Mirror Force. Kind of unfortunate, but not the worst. We can search out a Giant Soldier of Stone, and we still haven't normal summoned or set here, so we're just going to set a Mass Sorcerer. Pass back to them. They're just going to set 1, pass back to us. Swords is now gone, I believe. It is, yep. And we're going to flip up the Mass Sorcerer, summon out another Mass Sorcerer, which dodges around Trap Hole, and just attack in for 18. I think there's a bit of a misplay. I think we should have actually just gone for lethal, summoning out the Giant Soldier of Stone to attack in. If it did die to Trap Hole, that would be kind of unfortunate, but I think we had to push for it. As is, I think this is fine. Drops them down to 300 life points. Next turn, we can just summon out Cannon Soldier to kill them that way. And we do get to draw 2 cards here, so we can find protection for our Mass Sorcerers if we want it. They are just going to draw their last card. It is a Fissure, which will only deal with 1 of them, and they reveal that they've got a Heavy and a Trap Hole. So actually, I think it did work out that we attacked him with the 2 Mass Sorcerers. Maybe this was the correct play after all. But I feel pretty good about that game. And I feel pretty good about this deck. I think that you can be sort of like disappointed about it, as it doesn't really go too much into the fusion side of things all the time. But I think if it did try and just go all in on fusion, it would be a lot worse. And frankly, not really able to compete with a lot of the big threats in the format. Critter is a much more dangerous format than something like Yugi Kaiba. And the further down the jank path you go, the more exponentially difficult the games will become. So I do think that actually fitting this into a shell that is much more manageable and basically having just one brick in the deck in the form of polymerization is very nice and makes this deck actually pretty neat. And I do think the fusion does come up. You know, it's not just like, oh, we throw in a token polymerization to just name this deck fusion and then move on. I do think that bringing out a Twin-Headed Thunder Dragon can be incredibly strong at the end of the game. Sort of like how Cannon Soldier is used as just a way to finish off a game, so too can Twin-Headed Thunder Dragon be a way to finish off the game out of nowhere. The deck, of course, does have its flaws, like all decks do. Polymerization can be a big brick if you do draw it when you're in a game state where you really need a good top deck and you don't have the Thunder Dragons in hand. If you're forced to Twin-Headed Thunder Dragon early in the game, it can also be pretty bad because you can lose that to removal, and then your Muka Mukas later on will be a lot less good. But I think all in all, this deck is really good, really strong, and is both a testament to the power of Muka Muka Turbo, as this deck should probably be called just a variant of Muka Muka Turbo instead of Fusion on its own, and also a testament to sort of how these different strategies can improve over time. Like, Thunder Dragons fix one of the big problems that Fusion decks had in Yugi Kaiba, where it was a lot tougher to get Fusion materials easily accessible with a polymerization. The recruiters also greatly help in that regard, enabling you to search out Thunder Dragon very easily. And if you did try to make a deck with things like Black Skull Dragon or the like, being able to search out other Fusion materials for those as well would also be very nice. But that's going to do it for this video. I hope you enjoyed as always. If you liked the video, be sure to give it a like. And if you like this sort of content in general, be sure to subscribe to my channel. This week was a bit of a slow week for me, being Thanksgiving and all, but I will have a lot more Critter format content in the future. I just have a bit more jank decks to cover, and that should be it. So get excited for that. I don't think I'll ever completely stop playing Critter format, just like I haven't completely stopped playing Yugi Kaiba format. Although then again, I haven't made many videos on Yugi Kaiba format lately. Let me know in the comments down below if you'd like to see more Yugi Kaiba format videos. But if you enjoy this format, there will definitely be more content for you coming. So be sure to check that out and subscribe. We're almost at 250. It would be really cool to reach that by the end of November. So let's hope we can do that. But until next time, I've been Ben from YGO from Zero, and I'm signing off.